Welcome to the Divine Feminist podcast. I'm your host, Sirona West. I'm a psychic medium, Akashic Records healer, spiritual mentor, intuitive counselor, and author. This podcast is a love letter to myself, my children, and those of you who have experienced loss so great that you don't know if you can ever come back from it. I'm sharing parts of me in this show as a sort of collage through personal stories and lessons from my own life, through reading my favorite books, and hosting guests who have their own beautiful stories of overcoming, who inspire me as they courageously and authentically offer their gifts of healing with the world. All of these layers are here to remind you of the powerful and infinite being you are, and that your pain can be the roadmap to the new reality you choose to create. Join me on this journey of remembrance of who I am as a soul, a healer, and a divine feminine master in training. Hello, loves. Welcome back. I want to invite you to the Divine Feminist Gathering, which will be in Santa Monica on the beach, September 22nd from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. This is a book club and a healing circle. The book that we are reading right now is called You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, which is a book that changed my life, helped me to reprogram some of those unhelpful, limiting beliefs and thoughts, and really empowered me at a time in my life that I needed to reframe everything. So I hope you will join me. I will put the link in the description box. You can also find the link at sironawest.com/events. The second part of the gathering, the healing circle, is a beautiful time where you get to sit inside the nest, we call it, inside the healing circle, as everyone holds space for you to be seen as perfect, whole, and complete. This is a powerful practice. I have seen how quickly it works, and so I would love to see you there. So let's get into part 2 of discovering the Akashic Records. In the last episode, I told the story of how I was introduced to the record. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and check out episode 3 before listening to this one. So in 2020 is when I discovered the Akashic Records, and I'm going to explain a little bit about what the records are and how it works and the way that I work with them now. And then I will continue with that story. So you can think of the Akashic Records as the internet of the universe, and it contains all information, past, present, all possible futures, and all information about your soul. Not only the things that you've done or experienced in past or parallel lives, but also thoughts, intentions, feelings. The way that I believe is most powerful is to rewrite past lives, or what some people call parallel lives. We exist in so many different dimensions at the same time. So we are able to follow back the pain, the trauma, the fears, anything causing an issue in our lives. And we say, where did this originate? And our higher selves, our guides, will show us in our records exactly where that originated. So we're able to move on, move past that, and really free that version of ourselves. The way that I discovered the Akashic Records was through my own miraculous healing. In one session, I was totally healed from a very serious wheat allergy that I had that was affecting me for a couple of years. And once I had that session, it was a catalyst for so many things in my life to change. I was already living a really strange life at that moment, as many of us were. It was 2020, so it was the beginning of the pandemic, and many of us were living in this sort of chaotic mess of working from home, having children do school from home. I was really fortunate because I had been working from home for 4 years at that point, which was such a gift in my life to be able to be around for my kids. But at that point, things really, really began to change because, as I said in the previous episode, we were in and out of court fighting for custody of my kids every couple of months. And it had gotten to the point where I actually stopped sending them to visitation, which was going against our custody order because they were so fearful to go to visitation with their father. We were living in South Texas at the time, right on the Mexico border. And their dad lived in San Antonio, which was about 4 hours north. And so every other weekend, we would have to drive these 4 hours to take them to visitation, and then I would go and pick them up. So I was doing all the driving. It was heartbreaking dropping them off and heartbreaking picking them up. They were, I think when this began, the visitation began, they were about 3 and 4. It just got to the point where they would be grabbing onto my leg, screaming, crying. It was heartbreaking. So I made the decision to keep them home, and he would show up at our house. Sometimes he would bring a police officer, and I would just explain to the officer what was going on, that they were too scared and that there were a lot of concerns that I had. And so then the officer would end up telling him that he needed to go back to court. They would always say, this is a civil matter. You need to go back to court and get an enforcement order. That's what he did eventually. We went to court, and what they ended up deciding was a compromise. So I said, if you can't give me full custody and give him supervised visitation, which is what I really was looking for. I said, I don't want them to stay overnight. And so the judge said, if you don't want them to stay overnight and you want them just to go during the day, you're going to have to sell your house and move to be closer to their dad. And so that's what we did. My wife and I put our house on the market, which we had only built 2 years earlier. And so we sold the house for very little and moved to San Antonio. Now, during that whole process, it was a tumultuous time. Things with my wife were really going downhill. She was an alcoholic, and so we would have good days and bad days. Anybody who has lived with an alcoholic knows what that's like, I think, depending on the degree to which that person is trying to stay sober, the amount of support that they have, the amount of support that they're willing to receive and participate in. And so sometimes we would be sleeping in separate bedrooms. We would be fighting. It was just really a difficult time. And at the same time, I was starting to experiment with communicating with my guides and figuring out how does that work and what does that really mean once I had that Akashic Records session. And so I would do things like yes or no tarot online. And I think I started to learn how to use a pendulum and things like that. And I would ask questions and I would look for guidance and I would listen to videos and just really started to open up to my spiritual life. So that was really exciting. And I felt prompted to start to study the Akashic Records. And so I asked my guides about it, and I found a course to sign up for. It was something for me to focus on and learn how to better myself as a person, as a mother, learn how to get answers to help me navigate what was going on. Once I began to study how to get into the Akashic Records in this course, things began to open up quickly. So I remember we had moved to San Antonio and we weren't even renting a place. We were staying in an Airbnb. I had this really strong feeling that we weren't going to be staying in San Antonio for very long. I didn't know what was going to happen, but my intuition was strongly telling me this was not going to last. This was about October. So I remember sitting at the kitchen counter of this little house, and I was doing the homework for this course, which was to open my Akashic Records for the first time on my own. So not with the group, not with the instructor. I was excited and nervous at the same time. I had a notebook there to write notes. So I did the ritual prayer that I had been taught. And I remember I immediately saw myself and experienced two different past lives very quickly, which was overwhelming because they were both difficult things to see. Quickly after that, I remember having an encounter with Yeshua or Jesus, Mother Mary, and Mary Magdalene. And just, I got this knowing that, oh, this is something that I do. This is something I already know how to do. This is familiar to me. And this is what I have done for many lifetimes. And from that point on, was on what felt like my own journey with it. I enjoyed the class. I enjoyed the group sessions that we had, but I wasn't really following the course materials. I was just more like remembering how to do this and experiencing my own journey through it. So while this is going on, the kids would be visiting their father during the day. It was like a few hours on a Wednesday or Thursday night, and then like during the day on Saturday and Sunday. And when they would be with us, strange things were happening. I should have said this at the beginning, but there are going to be sensitive things that may be triggering here and may not be suitable for children. There was this little playground right up the street from where we were staying, and we really enjoyed going there every day. And my kids each had these little backpacks, and they would collect sticks and put their toys in there and water bottles and everything. So there was always lots of things in the backpacks. And I remember one day I took the backpacks out to the back porch, and I was emptying them out, just little reset. And I found a dead bird in one of the backpacks. It was kind of horrifying. My kids were, let's see, this was 2020. So by this time, they were about like 6 and 7. It was just strange energy. It was one of those moments where you just know something is wrong. There was something happening here. And so, of course, I talked to the kids about it. And so a few days went by and it happened again. I found another dead bird in one of the backpacks. Things like that continued to happen. There was always things happening even before we moved to San Antonio that were very, very concerning. in terms of behaviors that were not normal, a lot of regression to behaviors that we had already sort of graduated from. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but if you think about kids and trauma and ways that they're trying to communicate, it can come out in some pretty bizarre ways sometimes. We kept going through the motions of sending the kids to these daytime visitations. And after about 2 months, this was on December 10th, 2020, one of the twins ended up telling my wife the nature of the things that they had been experiencing at their dad's house. And it was very specific and very, very, very concerning. I ended up talking to him about it and talking to my other kids. And I called Child Protective Services, and someone immediately came to the house to interview the children about what they had shared with us. And it was determined that 2 of the kids, 2 out of the 3, would be taken for forensic interviews, which means they go to this place to be interviewed by people who are trained in talking to children about this type of thing. So we got it scheduled, took those 2 children to the interview, and for the next 2 months, while this investigation was ongoing, we were told not to send the kids to visitation. And so during that time, they would tell me more and more things. If you're familiar with anything like this, you know that in these situations, kids will only speak about this stuff when they feel safe, when they feel like they're not going to get in trouble for whatever they're saying. They began to feel safe enough because they hadn't seen their father in a little while, but they had also, it was a different dynamic from before. So they were a little bit older. And when they used to go to visitation with him and then come back home to us, they would sometimes be there for extended periods of time. He would actually have them for 45 days in the summer. He wouldn't let me speak to them. He wouldn't let me see them, even though I was supposed to have the right to do that. And so it was much more difficult for them to feel safe to speak up about exactly what was going on. So once they saw that the things that they said were being addressed, meaning they spoke up and then they weren't sent back to him, that's when they started to open up and tell me more and more things that had been going on. And it was absolutely heart-wrenching. I had known that something was not right, but I was not sure of what was going on. And it was very serious. So after 2 months, it was determined that the accusations were unfounded. That meant that they were supposed to start going to visitation again. And I was not going to let that happen. I was like, over my dead body, there is no way that I'm going to let this continue. And my frame of mind at that point was anything but this. I will do whatever I have to do, whatever it takes. I do not care. So Priscilla and I decided to go to Austin, just get out of town and work on the plan from there. We packed everything up again. We had things in storage and went to Austin. And that was quite an adventure because it was during an ice storm. There was no power. It was hard to find anywhere to stay. It was this totally crazy, chaotic time of life. Eventually, during this transition period where we were staying in these Airbnbs, things with Priscilla went downhill even more. So I decided, okay, I've got to separate from her and focus on making sure that these kids have stability and what they need. So we got an apartment, lived in Austin, just me and the kids, for about 6 months. That was beginning of 2021 till the summer. My spiritual life became more prominent. The growth that I was experiencing internally was really rapid. I could sense and experience my guides in almost a physical way. I would experience them cheering for me when I would break free of the situation or make a decision that I really needed to make that was challenging, or held it together as my kids continued to tell me really horrifying things. Every few days, there would be something new that they would tell me. And it was quite a lot to hold on my own. And so what was rising to the surface was clarity, the understanding that I had been living without awareness for so long, the understanding that I was making decisions unconsciously over and over and over again, just trying to feel a little bit better. So that was a beautiful process of unfolding. During that time in that apartment, I started a little community online called Earth School Community, would host these long rooms on Clubhouse talking about spirituality, and started doing readings with a friend of mine. We started doing different types of readings because all of my gifts were just really strongly coming in, and that was a lot of fun. So it was an interesting contrast to what I was living. But it was like the more I served others, the more I was able to start to heal in my own life, even as all of these things were falling apart around me. My relationship with my kids started to get so much deeper. The fact that they saw me doing whatever I could to keep them from experiencing the things that they had been through for so many years, it just strengthened this bond that we had. There's definitely a lesson here about the ways that we create what we want going forward. I was not consciously creating yet. I was not sure of how to create something different. I was still creating from fear and from the desire to escape what I had unconsciously created already, which was a repeat of things that I experienced growing up, which was a repeat of patterns in my family, all of these layers that it took me a while to see and understand, but I was doing the best that I could at the time. And the fact that I was exercising boundaries was huge. So we experienced quite a lot just being in that apartment. We eventually left because it was so dangerous. We were being stalked. We were found. We were stalked. I have to tell all of these things in pieces. It's just so much to process verbally. And again, that's why I'm here, is to make that connection with those of you who feel like you've been so isolated, lost so much, nobody can relate to it. And I appreciate your patience as I try to do it as gracefully as I possibly can. So what was really beautiful is that I continued to expand and open up and experience synchronicities and miracles and the protection that comes with listening and following your intuition. That's how we stayed protected. And we would go on to stay protected for 2 years. So I will continue this story and fill in probably some of the answers to the questions you may have. But for now, I'm going to leave it at that. And I just want you to know that whatever you're going through, it may be in a relationship, it may be an illness, it may be to do with systems, families being separated, maybe not being heard or seen or believed. There are so many scenarios that we're all going through. And the important thing is that we know that we're not alone. I really want to convey that we're creating all along, and we do create our reality. And it's sometimes a long, drawn out process to uncreate what you created unconsciously. And that's okay, because we're engaging with the process and we're learning and we're showing each other how it's done. Namaste. Remember to take your deep breaths, and I'll see you back here next time. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If you're enjoying this podcast, I encourage you to take a moment to give it a 5-star rating and a review. This helps other people like you to find it. To be notified when there's a new episode, be sure to follow the show as well. And if you're joining me on YouTube, you can show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. I look forward to connecting with you in the next episode.